incorporating another one that can pose a lot of challenges for raising capital, because it uses the Federal Securities Exchange Commission, which is really difficult to work with. So that's one of the reasons why Don was suggesting not to incorporate in a different state, but it varies for depending on your co-op. We talked about budgeting for lawyers and how that can be a large expense for startup co-ops, and for some people it might be good to budget even a couple $1,000s starting up. That's good to have a lawyer on a regular basis for anything that comes up in your co-op. So even after you've done your articles and your bylaws, it's good to have an ongoing relationship with a lawyer. We talked about subordination.
And a CPA.
And a CPA, yeah, sorry. Subordination of capital, which is like if you have an investor in your business, legally it looks like not having they don't have a vote. There's a limit on the interest they can collect on their investment, and the purpose of the business has to remain that's not to maximize profit for those people, but to operate the business and its function. And Judy, do you have anything else you want to add?
We talked a little bit about multi-stakeholder co-ops that are hybrid co-ops or solidarity co-ops, and why more co-ops don't adopt that model. Primarily because once you're a co-op, you've got you're sort of got a legal structure, and it's hard to undo that. But we also talked about the difference, or why a co-op rather than an LOC, or why some people prefer an LOC, and how B corporations, which also do subordination of capital, but don't necessarily have one member, one vote, why people choose B corporations or LLCs instead of co-ops, and that being a matter of values, and how our culture doesn't support cooperating, and it's a matter of education or yeah. And the only other thing that we talked about was spending more time on a business plan than on legal issues, because what really matters is making that commitment, having members who are committed to the nitty-gritty and the mechanics of operating the business, of figuring that out, how the business is going to operate. Is that about right?
Right. I guess the only part of that I want to maybe correct is I really don't think of B corporations as having met the subordination of capital criterion for subchapter T treatment. I mean, really, a B corporation or a benefit corporation has basically has effectuated an agreement among its investors that to some extent the company will forego return on investment in favor of achieving other desirable social objectives. But at the end of the day, it's still a traditional business that exists to provide return on shareholder investment, whereas a co-op isn't in business to do that. That's what subordination of capital really is.
And one more point our group talked about was groups that are considering, but we want to start up with grants and charitable contributions. Should we form a nonprofit and maybe get 501c3 designation, tax exempt designation, and then be as co-op-y as we can under that? It's possible, it's been done, but there are groups that act as fiscal sponsors for that charitable work that you're doing, and even can help. The technical assistance that those groups offer can be charitable work and receive tax exempt donations for that. So Co-op Fund of New England does that, Cooperative Development Institute does that, Worcester Roots does that for local co-ops. So there are other ways of dealing with that instead of getting your whole 501c3 designation.
So I do want to correct that a little bit though. I am not recommending that anybody here try to get tax exempt status under Section 501c3, because one of the things that you absolutely can't do if you're a 501c3 nonprofit is called private inurement, which means basically any enriching of people personally as owners. That's just completely verboten under Section 501c3. You have to comport yourself with the charitable purposes that are listed in that statute, and it's just fundamental. It's a fine thing. Charitable organizations are great, but if you're starting a worker co-op, it probably means that you want private inurement, right? You're trying to, make some money. So, and that's what ownership in a co-op is all about. Labor inputs in exchange for patronage. That doesn't jive with Section 501c3.
Okay. Yeah, burning thing, and then we need to go to the next group. Go ahead.
Because we talked a little bit about this in land trusts, like setting up a land trust with some of the co-op values, just because you cannot set up a land trust as you have to be a nonprofit to be a land trust.
Well, if you're a land trust, you do want to become a nonprofit,
Right.
because that is considered a charitable purpose. And you like the idea of being able to say, would you donate some money to me? You can deduct it from your taxes.
Right. So, but we still want to use that.
Okay, we lost sound over here.
What?
Someone tap the
Oh,
mute
is
button.
You
Yeah.
can't hear anything.
Okay.
That was the mute button with it.
Sorry. We just mute you.
Can you have dual status in some way? Can you be both, say, a land trust and a worker cooperative? You can't.
But it comes down to, if you're defining co-op as a democratic governance principles, then that's what we were talking about, how you could build that into the board, the governance of this
Of a land
nonprofit,
trust.
right, of the land trust.
But you can't have ownership.
But you can have
It wouldn't be
associated.
ownership, exactly, so we talked about, is the ownership piece important, and if it's not, if it's really more about, are you figuring out a way for people to have equal say, then you can do that with the bylaws and the governance of the board. Yeah.
Or you can have associated corporations. One holds land and one does business, right? And they can be related in the ways that you
Okay,
want them to.
all right.
But they have to be two separate.
Yeah, but they can be affiliated, so they can have formal ties with each other.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, like association or something, some sort.
Great. Other group? A quick report? Anyone?
That was one piece of it.
Yeah. So
And then looking at the securities question.
Yeah, and the other piece we spend a lot of time talking about securities law and how that plays out with co-ops and investments into co-ops, and basically talked about a security being allowing someone to invest in your co-op or business without having a vote, and talking about so this is kind of a specific question for soul chariots too, about like whether or not taking on an investor or accepting an investment from an outside person would be infringing upon our co-op values, or would mess with our voting system, or would undermine our efforts to like return profits to the workers. But basically, yeah, Gary was saying that Gary and Kayla were saying that as long as the investor knows, is informed of the risk and understands that, and understands where the financial situation of the business, the transaction can go through. And
In that particular context, where it's just one investor, they know it's not like they're advertising for people to come and invest,
Yeah.
on the back of the penny pad.
The SEC is finalizing its crowdfunding rule.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, finally. No, that's just
And once that's done, then you can look at that rule and see if crowdfunding will work for you.
Yeah.
It's basically a way of avoiding securities registration, which is the thing that nobody wants to do because it's horrible.
We talked about that.
Except there is that place in wherever, Maine, I think, that made friends with the local SEC office, and is able to take advantage of those public shares.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of making friends with the local SEC office, because there really isn't such a thing. But what they're probably talking about is making friends with the securities regulator in Maine. Because if you're not doing interstate business, if you're just seeking investors within your state, chances are you only have to comply with a state securities law. And if you're in a small state like Maine, you can cozy up to the state securities regulator and maybe get them to kind of allow you to do what you want to do without having to go through a lot of registration requirements.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that if the investor is in the state or out of the state.
And that's the reason I don't recommend incorporating in a different state than the one you're doing business with, because if you do that, you're by definition operating on an interstate basis, right?
So we have to wrap this up. I want to thank all the presenters who came from far away and gave up your precious evening. And know that we got a lot out of it here in this room, but we're going to be bringing it back to our co-op members, and it's reaching a lot of folks, and it's really helpful for a lot of people. And we're putting it online. You know, a lot of the resources that we're sharing hopefully will be useful for the whole movement. So thank you very much for coming out. I have a couple announcements and suggestions for things that you can do between now and the next session so that we can keep getting the most out of these Co-op Academy sessions. One, a reminder that there are technical assistant grants available. Cooperative Fund of New England has a grant available. It's open right now. I've emailed it out a few times to each co-op where you can apply for technical assistance and get it from Co-op Fund of New England or a partner like CDI or Boston Center for Community Ownership. And that those are kind of probably first come, first serve, so to get those in soon. And if you have questions, yeah, do you have something?
Are Rhode Island co-ops eligible?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Can't
so.
think of why they wouldn't be.
There was
Yeah.
some wording in the document that made me think that it was for Massachusetts economic development specifically.
Oh, okay. Let's check on that right after this.
I just wanted to see if you knew by chance.
And then, so next week we're doing products and customers, and we've done those worksheets right in the past where we've defined our products and our customers, and we've talked about how to do secondary research and how to do primary research, but we haven't talked about how we've done that research or where we're at in the process and where we're getting stuck and where we're going forward. So that's the main focus for next week. So please bring whatever you've done on all four of those, right? Customers, products, secondary research, and primary research, and we'll be pushing that stuff forward next week. And then going forward, taking what we learned today and getting your legal documents going. And Gary's and Don's contacts are on the front of that of the paperwork we gave out, so you can get in touch with them for more information. There's a couple other co-op lawyers on that sheet as well. So anything else or any questions or suggestions?
So I'm on the board of CDI soon will be, or
Oh.
nominated, whatever it is, elected, point, whatever. Anyway, they want me to take a picture and then blog about and tonight and promote Worcester Roots, so is that okay if I snap the shot?
What's CDI?
The Cooperative Development Institute.
Okay, quick group photo over here in front of the